call the meeting to order and document the time at 6:35. And if you would join me in the pledge, please. Flag behind you. Behind most of you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you very much. Reorient. All right. So any agenda review or adjustments? Anything anybody had seen? Okay. So moving on to focus on learning. Sean, if you can kick it off.
My job tonight, before we get to our wonderful teachers who are going to give you a lot more specific detail about Tier 1, is to kind of remind you about what we talked about last month so that you have the big picture of what this is all about. So last month we talked about how we've done a really good job in the last 4 or 5 years of adding supports. So in terms of staffing and programming, we've added people in who can come in and provide those services to our students in different areas like listed below, ELL, special education, data, wellness, and so forth. Now it becomes about how do you take all these talented people, both resources within the organization and externally, and how do we develop a coherent web of supports so that everybody in the organization and parents know when there are challenges going on, where do they go? And then how do we activate those services in a way that we're not stepping on each other, we're not duplicating services, we're not missing opportunities to support kids. And we talked about the jargon for those are multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS. A stands for academics and B stands for behavior. And then we have the 3 tiers. And tonight we're really talking about Tier 1, which is referred to as core or universal. So it's what we do for all kids, that with the purpose of being able to meet a very high percentage of students with those supports, and that they will be able to learn and have a lot of on-task time given these types of supports. And now I'm going to turn it over to the elementary folks who will introduce themselves and talk to you in more detail about the Tier 1 efforts that they're working on. Right-hand side. Good.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I'm Courtney Bry. I'm a kindergarten teacher here, and I co-teach with
Sarah Forbes, and I'm the kindergarten and first grade ELL teacher. And additionally, we're both on the JFK leadership team.
and this summer, as well as the summer before, JFK sent a leadership team to the BEST conference to start working on making sure that JFK is a part of really setting that example for students and working through Tier 1 and Tier 2 supports.
And so just to build on what Sean was saying about the Tier 1 supports, for example, around food security, these are things that are available to all students all the time. And when we think about it at the JFK level, we often think about Tier 1 as things that can happen in the classroom without necessarily extra help. So things that we do are give out hearts, which you may have seen or heard about, for honest, engaged, appropriate, responsible, and timely behavior. And we are very specific about giving students feedback about what they've done to earn the hearts. And there's some kids that will be talking about that in a minute, so I don't want to talk too much about it. And then responsive classroom is a piece that Sarah Robb has introduced that's been very successful at setting an atmosphere in each classroom of love and caring and community, and really helping kids form the relationships that will help them be successful in their learning. And part of that is explicit modeling of expectations. So we don't take it for granted that kids know how to do things like sit in a circle on the carpet or use the bathroom appropriately, like teaching all of those skills.
And all of JFK uses the same matrix for every expectation. So everyone has a binder with the expectations for everything from walking in the hall and using the bathroom to what recess looks like and what it looks like to be in the cafeteria.
And those matrices are also posted around the school and even in spaces like the playground, so that they're always available to teachers and students to review those expectations. There's also the possibility that if teachers are having some struggles with students or a particular student, that they can invite coaches in. That's those resources that Sean was talking about. So we've got, you know, our behavior coach and literacy coach and guidance counselors. Those are people you can invite into the classroom for a general observation to give the teacher tips on how they might adjust their instruction to better meet the needs of all the kids in their classroom.
So our goal is to create a positive community in school where students can succeed academically as well as socially and emotionally. We want them to really know what's expected and explicitly teach that, but we also want them to feel comfortable and feel like they can grow and be a part of the community and feel invested in their learning. And before we can get to that, we want to make sure that they understand everything that's expected here and are supported in every way. So these are a first grader and a second grader who are going to
And also a fourth grader. What grade
And
is Lambert in?
fourth grade.
Lambert's a little piece at the end. Three brothers.
They're just going to talk about
And Jarl.
yeah. So they're going to talk about what it means to have heart.
Hi, my name is Yaro. Hi, my name is Ramadani.
Hi, Yaro and Ramadani. Can you tell us what heart means?
Heart means honest, engaged, planning, appropriate, responsible, timely, and how to do the stuff. Like if how to be responsible. You have to listen when like your teacher is reading a book. You have to listen and keep your body to yourself and your hands to yourself and your mouth has to be quiet and your eyes looking at the book. The teacher.
And maybe what does it mean to be timely, Yaro?
For direction the first time. Just your heart means when you are honest, engaged, appropriate, when you're listening to the teacher, when you're being double honest and double engaged.
And what happens when you do those things?
You became a JFK heart.
What happens when you do those things?
You get hard, you earn hard, and if you feel, and then you put them in your heart bucket. If you fill your heart bucket, you need to dump it and have the salvation. And if the whole spoon fills the heart bucket and fills up our celebration.
The heart. What do you hope will be the next all-school celebration?
I hope it's gonna be like a giant pool.
What's your favorite celebration so far?
If you couldn't hear him, he said working with my kindergarten buddies, which I just thought was awesome. How things changed from second
All the
grade.
students were former students of Sarah and I. Pretty proud.
You probably have to X out of the big screen, I think, to get back.
So as the boys talked about, it means being excited to learn, feeling safe, feeling positive, and having those supports in place so that they're engaged in our community as a school and so that they're successful because they know what's expected down to, oh, where is my body? Where are my hands? What am I doing when I'm thinking about math? What does that mean to me? So that they're really understanding every piece of what we're asking them.
And this is actually the slides we used to introduce what HEART was and PBIS at the beginning of the school year with kids. So our big thing was making sure it was really visual, kid-friendly, and pretty much most of the teachers adopted this PowerPoint to use and then plug in their own pictures and things so that it was also visual and kids were seeing themselves in what we're trying to explain to them. So as Ramadani was explaining and Yaro, this is what we do with the hearts. We put them in a bucket. When each classroom fills up their heart bucket, they get to have a classroom celebration, and that's usually something they vote on as a class. And then those go in the heart monitor. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, we have a big celebration for all of the classrooms who filled their jar, and we all cheer in the hallway, and it's really hectic and wonderful. And then when the heart monitor is full, we have a whole school celebration, and each grade level team is in charge of coming up with a celebration, but the leadership team usually does the first one just so it's not too much pressure. And I think we're going to be doing a parade in a week's time for filling our heart monitor for the first time this year.
And last year, there's a picture of our bubble party and bingo that we did with the kids. I don't know that we said it explicitly, but when we give the children hearts, we are very specific in what we say. So it might be, I see that you're sitting and looking at your book. I see that you're walking safely in the hallway. I notice that you used kind words with your friends, so that they're connecting not just a good job, but what they've done and how that's impacting each other. So they all have choices to make, and we talk to them about these choices all the time throughout the day. It's embedded in our community of learning. And we talk about that mistakes are part of learning, but they happen to all of us. And when we make a mistake or we have a choice, there are many ways that we can take that choice, and we want them to be able to learn how to be in control of their choices.
And this is another tier 1 support, is that we have these systems in place in every classroom all around the school, so that when kids do make mistakes, which they inevitably will, you give them these opportunities of places that they can pull themselves back together. And these are also explicitly taught in a way that's positive, so they're not seen as, punitive, but this is a space for you to go, a take a break space where you can calm yourself down, where you can maybe do a little mindful coloring until you feel ready and calm enough to join the general instruction again. And if that's not working, then we also have a buddy room system. So you might go to the classroom next door until, maybe you just need a change of scenery, change of crowd. And then we also have the student support room, which is available for kids who those two initial pieces aren't working for them. So those are all systems in place to support kids when they need it.
And the SSR has 3 behavior interventionists and a behavior coach available to the kids to really process and grow from whatever is happening in that moment and be able to positively come back to the class. Sarah mentioned that it's taught positively. Students are also allowed to self-select to go take a break, and we encourage students to start to pay attention to their own state of mind in the classroom and throughout the day and make those choices for themselves.
So we already talked a bit about the buddy room and everything, but I don't know that we mentioned Teacher Talk. So Teacher Talk is available to teachers at Tier 1 as a way to organize collaboration and problem solving. So if there is a child who's having a particularly difficult time, you can get together as a teaching team and invite any other members of our staff whom you think might be beneficial in that meeting to problem solve, come up with some additional strategies that the classroom teacher might not have thought of, and put into place to try and help the child in the class. So those have been really successful so far, and in helping teachers feel supported, and also from those meetings have come some really successful plans and interventions. Again, those are available to all kids all the time and all teachers all the time. So that's it.
Yeah.
And yeah, we encourage students to do their best all the time.
And now we'll hand it over to...
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Hi, my name's Andrea Boone. I'm a 6th grade math and science teacher on Team Nexus in the middle school. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our instructional and content choices that our Tier 1 supports for everybody, and then Thomas will talk more about behavior and developmental design, so that is coming. So some Tier 1 examples in the middle school are Writer's Workshop. So Writer's Workshop, this is our second year bringing this into the middle school. I believe they do Reader's Workshop in the elementary. And Writers. So this is a K through 8 experience now. And this is sort of a gradual release of responsibility. There's 3 units of study, and they vary. The type of writing varies depending on the grade level. But I actually was in a classroom yesterday where kids were sharing their writing with each other and listening and giving feedback, and it was just a calm, safe, really awesome environment to be in. So they get used to critiquing their writing, revising it, and really working on those pieces. Math Best Practices is a K through 12 experience for students. This is a way to engage all learners in math. Students learn how to talk to each other about math, and it's really a shift from that traditional way of teaching. So you really elicit a lot of curiosity in the problems, and they look at math as something that's sort of intriguing and creative and flexible, and we encourage many different ways of thinking and talking and learning about math. And then Spartans in Motion, so this is our movement time. This is based on what we know about what research says about the brain and movement. So every middle schooler experiences 25 minutes a day of this structured movement time in their advisory. So they go through circuits 3 days a week, and then a couple days a week their advisory chooses a game to play all together. So not only are we sort of responding to what research says about the brain and movement, but we're building community in our advisories, and it's really an opportunity to sort of celebrate as well, because we have Spartan games 3 times a year, and they sort of rally together and compete in a friendly, kind of fun way. And then something new to the middle school this year is expeditionary learning, and we're really, really excited about this. So this is sort of our newer, well, not newer. It's last year we did project-based learning and GILab, and they were sort of felt separate from the content areas. If you talk to students, they might not really connect them back to humanities and STEM. So a group of teachers went a couple times a year. There were 2 or 3 separate groups that went to King Middle School in Portland, Maine, and it has a really similar demographic to our school. And they do expeditionary learning. So it's 8 to 12 week units that are really interdisciplinary and for all learners. So they start with a really engaging launch, and you get kids super, super excited, and then they dive into the work, and it's actually in the core classes. So I don't want to give too much away about the Circus Smirkus, because we're all launching our units this week, but for example, the 6th grade is doing Cue the Circus, so we'll launch on Friday, and all the kids will participate. If you see any 6th graders in the hallways, they are now spinning plates, so that's the first foray into it. But so each kid has each student has an expectation of producing this high quality piece of work in the end, and but the pathway for each student might look a little different, so it's really responsive to their needs. But the idea is it's rigorous, it's really embedded in the content areas. We pull in people from the community to act as experts, and they'll work with kids. It encourages revision of your work. So that's the expeditionary learning piece. I had a few other things written down, but my phone is not working, so turn it off.
Amazing how that happens.
Yeah, every time.
One of the things I'd add to that too is just this Circus Smirkus piece is being supported by at the state level by a $60,000 grant under flexible pathways. So we're appreciative that the state is supporting that innovative work.
I had a chance to see some of it today in action, and students are really digging it. Good evening, everybody. I'm Thomas Shearer. I'm the behavior coach for the middle and high school. I'm here to share with you that half of the pyramid that's about behavior, but there's really a ton of overlap into the other A side as well because of the social, emotional, and skill building components of what we're doing too. The first thing I want to share with you is around developmental design. So this is the continuation of responsive classroom from the elementary school, developmentally appropriate for our middle school students. There's an emphasis on relationships, the love that we have for our students, the caring, the unconditional positive regard we're building for the students within the framework of that, social contracting, the class agreements that are being made together about class expectations that really come from their shared experience that they find value in because their experience is informing what becomes the contract that they set together, that they move forward on. It allows the teachers to step away from that role. You know, I need you to do this because I'm the authority figure here in the classroom. And developmental designs has more of a framework in which the group shares the accountability through their daily experience connected to that set of expectations we create together. A tab system that's really about self-care. So it's a privilege-based system where students have the opportunity either inside the classroom or outside in a buddy classroom to be able to use the skills they have to regulate the energy that's going on for them. Inside the classroom, students have the ability to decide for themselves that they need that opportunity to recognize themselves, that there's a need to readjust the energy, and they can go move to that, come back when they're ready. The teacher typically will ask the student to step out of the classroom when it's clear that their energy doesn't match where it needs to be for the learning in the classroom. They'll leave with a slip that functions as their pass, go to that classroom, then come back when they're ready, check that back in with the teacher. Usually they'll do a quick process later in the class when they have time to do that. And it allows them to keep building the skills through the daily practice in those exercises. And often classes will just practice them naturally so every student gets to experience it. And also a critical component here is boosting the advisory system, offering lots of activities and routines that advisories go through for them to build a momentum and create really strong connections there at that level. Most everybody now has been through a voluntary training that they've done during the summer, and a number of staff, myself included, have moved into the advanced levels of developmental designs training. And the last thing I want to mention is right now we're 6 weeks into the school year, roughly 6 weeks into the school year, and so this is the time where we've put out and offered a checklist and self-reflection to our teaching team, which gives them an opportunity to give us feedback around where they are in terms of their practice so that we can offer them direct supports to help build the areas where they feel like they need some more help. The next effort that we have underway is Wellness Room 113. So this is a transition from what we had been doing last year within the planning room. A lot of what I've put on the screen here is really oriented toward the tier 2, but I do want to highlight that because we have this model now in place and our full Bravo team, as we're calling it, in place, it's allowed us the opportunity to offer more direct support to teachers out into the classroom to be able to help them with their practice and be able to assist students in need out in the classroom around social, emotional, behavioral stuff that's coming up during the course of the day. What we're doing in the wellness room is really around the 5 R's model, from regulate to relate, reason, prepare, and then return. Every student needs something a little bit different, so it's really very individualized that way. And the self-regulation comes through a self-care model, identifying those things that each individual matches them best in terms of their ability to give back to a regulated place as quickly as possible. And using mindful practice a lot during that time and space too. Our team is also fully into the new Swiss data system. So everything we're collecting now in terms of data creates a solid baseline for us to be able to use to compare year to year to year. And finally, I want to talk just a little bit about the keystone habit that we put in place that is timeliness. We recognize together as a middle high school that in order for heart to be authentic, we had to buckle down and really address the areas of tardies and the areas of class cuts so that the whole heart would then become fully authentic in terms of its meaning and value. We've updated the protocols to both tardies and the class cuts, so the accountability is in place. The wellness room our team is supporting that to be doing skill building with students. So if it really is a time management issue, we're supporting them around that. If there's some barrier that's getting in the way, we'll help them problem solve through that. If we're doing motivational interviews with them as a way to identify if there's something connected to their motivation that we can understand better as a way to help them work through that and then be able to effectively be accountable for their time. And the last thing I'll mention is there's an example of it down here. Hall passes, bathroom passes and stuff like that had been haphazard. Folks were doing the best they could with what they had. We've now created a universal system and students are doing a spectacular job at asking for them, showing them, being accountable for them, and it's helped a lot with us getting this keystone habit underway. Thanks.
Thank you.
High school.
All right. I don't know my left and right. Okay. Hi, I'm Christina Lauterbach, and I am one of the team members for the 9th grade humanities class. John McKelvey is not with us tonight, and our newest addition is Carrie Mon, our reading specialist. She is now joining us for 45 minutes every single day in our humanities class. So a little bit of background information on humanities. It is team taught. There's a lot of adults in the room. There are often 26 students and 4 adults. So that is one way that we support our children, by having plenty of adults. If you don't want to talk to Miss Lauterbach, you can talk to Miss Mon, and all the way around. It is an English and social studies class. It meets every single day for 80 minutes, which is different than most of the high school student classes that meet every other day. So I think that that's one way that students are able to just get a sense of continuity and security throughout their high school, their first year of high school. It is a mix of 9th grade, upper level ELL students, and occasionally we get a few 8th graders. So because we have those flexible pathways, students are often ready to be in the doing the 9th grade curriculum when they're in 8th grade, and so that's often a conversation. And then frequently when a student has reached sort of ELL 4, we'll have a conversation and say, do you think this student is ready for the mainstream English class? And this is super useful to have a mature 11th or 12th grader sometimes in the room with these 9th graders. Can be challenging for them to deal with those freshmen, but it's also it's so helpful to have just some of that mature example. So, priorities that we have for the freshmen is pretty much since I have been working here, it's my 6th year here, we've been working with the GXs. And I'm fortunate that I work in the communication GX, and with social studies we do the critical thinking GX. And we have been using those to really support the students. And we use this idea, the theme of perspective, and taking on other people's perspectives throughout social studies and in our language arts, to really understand what other people are experiencing and how, when we understand who they are, it helps us be better people. So one thing that we do is, again, we really focus on the writing and the speaking GPs, and all of our students come from the different teams in the middle school, and they've all had a different exposure. It's getting more solidified, I think, to like the vocabulary that we use around writing and reading and speaking. And so in 9th grade, we really focus on the GXs and those rubrics and get them comfortable with that language. We spend a lot of time, Bill Rich, I took one of his courses like 6 years ago about the first 6 weeks of school. First day of school with the freshmen, interviewing each other, getting up in the front of the class and introducing that to their partner, and sitting down and doing reading and writing. As soon as you get to high school, it's rigorous, we're working. We spend the first couple of days just doing content. And sometimes kids are like, oh, what's this class all about? And I'm like, well, we'll get there. Let's first, just do some work. We do create social contract. But we create our social contract. We call it that we say we're a community of readers and writers. And I got this from the Green Mountain Writing Project. We talk about what do you need as a reader and a writer to be able to share your thinking and to be able to be a good reader. Hopefully Destiny remembers all of it. And we come up with this agreement that, and the list can be pretty long, that what you need as a reader is you need imagination, but you also need a good book. And then as a writer, you need some time to think. And so as a teacher, I'm gonna honor all of those types of things. So they come up with what they need in the classroom, and they all sign the contract, I sign the contract, and we go from there. We definitely, there's still with the clear expectations for turning in their work to demonstrate their learning. We use Canvas. We've been using Canvas with their computers for the past few years, and we've been pretty successful. It helps them to stay organized, to know where and when their assignments, where they should turn them in and when they are due. And then again, we really focus on the GXs and using those rubrics to really just introduce them to that language, or not reintroduce it, reintroduce it, because they should be getting it in the middle school. That's what I've got.
Okay. And so I'm joining the humanities for the first time. This is my 3rd year as the reading specialist in the high school. For the past 2 years, I've been doing pull-out groups, which would be more of a tier 3 support. But looking at our data, I realized that we have a universal need. And so, as Christina said, I am in the humanities class for the first 45 minutes. That first 20 minutes, I'm actually doing small group instruction. So, based on needs of students and scores using the FAST assessment, I've made groups up. There'll be 5 groups that will go throughout the year. Each group will have 6 weeks of small group instruction with me. That will be pretty much, it's a very shortened version of what I was teaching in my pull-out group. We go through some just some basic reading strategies, and then because the kids are grouped somewhat homogeneously, we can then move forward based on their need. So they get to choose the book that they want, or the topic if they want to do something nonfiction. And then we go through, okay, well, what's happening in your brain as you're reading? What are the text features telling you? What are some ways to develop context clues? And then we also have a great opportunity to have really deep discussions. So 3 days, usually we read in our book, and then 1 day we'll journal. So currently one of my groups is reading a really interesting book about a new girl who is feeling out of place in a new school, and she's dealing with stereotypes around her race, as well as being sort of the target of a bully that she doesn't know who it is, like it's an anonymous bully. And so last week we talked about stereotypes and how they affect our behavior. Tomorrow we'll be talking about bullying and how we deal with things like that. So it's a great opportunity for the kids, again, to have a real life discussion around real life issues, to read things at their reading level within their zone of proximal development so they can move forward and then also develop some very practical skills. On the 5th day that I'm in there, on Fridays, I do a whole group lesson with the entire class on another reading strategy that ties into what they're doing as a book. So right now we're reading Seed Folks as a book, and it requires a lot of inferring to figure out who the characters are and how they're related to each other. There's a lot of interweaving with it. And so we are doing a strategy with just recognizing the subject and the predicate, and then also we're doing like a logic puzzle. So just, my goal is really to destigmatize the idea of needing reading help. Also so that all students see me as a resource in the classroom, not just somebody that's, you know, if you're special and you need extra help, you go see this person, but as somebody to work with. And in conjunction with humanities, I'm also visiting American Studies classes. I helped all the students find books to work on for their semester-long project on an American activist. I also am in one of Steve Crowley's science classes, and we're doing reading strategies around nonfiction in there. And also in health classes, I'm in 2 of the health classes. So just again, a tier 1 support that all students are getting additional reading support, very direct instruction about things that might have just gone over their heads in the past with you know, just the subtleties of reading, because reading is very much an internal skill that seems kind of magical for the people who don't have it. So that's what we're doing in high school.
I will say that first 20 minutes, the students are not missing anything in
Yes.
our class, in the humanities class, because we do sort of a soft start. Mondays and Wednesdays, we write into the day, 7 minutes of sustained writing and sharing, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays, we silent read for 20 minutes, and they get to pick their own book. And Carrie has helped, and Matt always helps kids find books that they're interested in. So that 20 minutes, we like that flexibility for kids to kind of warm up into the day.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for anyone else?
You want to start?
No, you
Oh,
start.
I know you got 100 of them. I guess my thought, rather than digging into any individual piece, we've spent a lot of time in the last, 6 months talking metrics. Come down to I'll say the easy things, the reading, the math, because you can put a number on it. Absenteeism, tardiness, it's easy. You know, it's 1, 2, 6, put a number on it. You can take an average, you can do all kinds of things. The work that you guys are doing is just, it gives me the knowledge that when we see a reading score, it's not just a number. There's so much more work in the background that goes on with it. The simple things like behavior, as you get into the early part, trying to work with middle school, as all the things that middle school brings with it, just to get focus. And in high school, kind of the transition to really getting things moving. It just puts a whole different perspective for me on the measurements that we're looking for and what do we want out of this system. Good people is a big deal. Can they read? That's huge. But, they've got to really have all the basis of what you guys are doing here first. And just, I wanted to say thank you for all the hard work. The one thing that I did have a question, though, out of all of that is, you guys are all here because you have a leadership role in implementing something to see that it stays in place. Been there, done that. The hard part is getting everybody to come with you. How do you sense the rest of the staff is working with that thought and all of the other things that are going on as well? Is it overwhelming, or is it stitched right in that works? I would like to go with each group.
This is like a big piece for us at Best, actually. In the summer, we were meant to be working on Tier 2, and we came back together as a leadership team and looked at all the feedback we've been getting from the staff and what things were really working and what things were still kind of overwhelming or confusing. And we ended up spending a good chunk of our time at Best just reviewing Tier 1 supports and making sure we had a good plan for working out the kinks and supporting those things that were working really well. And I feel like this year it's hugely successful that we spent that time, because we, like for teacher talks, for example, last year they were kind of bumpy you know, there was like a protocol to follow and not everybody really was sticking to the protocol, so we weren't really getting these strategies in place for kids. But this year, we spent a lot of time at the beginning of the year remodeling what teacher talk looked like. Each leadership team member went into a teacher talk and modeled it. And now I feel like they're running really smoothly and teachers aren't afraid of them anymore because we spent that extra time to work on them. But in terms of like the hearts and all of that piece, everybody's behind it. Everybody sees the benefit of it. There's really positive energy all around JFK, I think.
Not only do the staff buy into it as well, but coming from last year into this year, I think the momentum of the kids that have bought into it and that are engaged in it and are excited about it is just kind of
Right.
astounding, and how much they look forward to those cheering each other on in the hallway and how much they are buying into it. We've got a lot of kindergartners recently handing out hearts to adults, which is great because they've internalized that. You know, they're like, oh, this is part of what we do here. We all look out for each other. So it's at
Teachers
JFK,
respect.
Yeah.
I mean, teachers respond to when kids are positive and excited about something. Obviously, teachers are going to be more on board with it. So
Yeah.
I think it's
We
going
have
well.
a really good staff support.
How's the middle school?
So I'll speak specifically to expeditionary learning because I feel like that's the kind of the newer piece. I would say the sense is overwhelmed, but in a really positive way. We recognize it's going to be a little bit muddy. We recognize it's going to take some learning, but it really provides that authentic learning experience for students, and it's really developmentally responsive to what middle schoolers need. I think it's really hard to approach curriculum from like a humanities, this is math, this is science approach for middle school. I think it truly needs to be connected, and also connected to sort of their need to collaborate, ask questions, and almost argue with you in a sense. It's overwhelming, yes, because we're new to it, but we see the value and we're super, super excited.
And then the high school, any further, Tom?
I would just add to what Andrew said, you know, there are times when everything we're trying to accomplish does feel overwhelming, and I think most people would say that, but because the efforts that are in place now make sense in terms of how they fit together, so that the purpose and value is well understood, that folks have some autonomy in terms of their daily experience, that the relationships that we're connected to with each other and we're connecting to the students all build and support on themselves. The trauma-informed pieces that we've taken the time to really dig into this year fit neatly into a developmental design framework, so that when folks can look at it and see how neatly they're woven together, it gives them the extra oomph to embrace it and take it where it needs to go. So that's the kind of energy I'm feeling in it. Even on difficult days, there's that sense that we're headed in the right direction, so let's keep it going.
High school?
Well, as far as being more in the Universal High School this year, I've gotten a huge positive response. I actually, even though we're on block scheduling, I move every 45 minutes rather than every 90 because so many teachers wanted to have reading assistants in the classroom. I hope to work with another group of teachers next year, although I'm really enjoying the opportunity too, because what I'm seeing is we have so many great things already happening in our classroom right now that in many cases it becomes, all right, there needs to be an extra adult in the classroom to maybe just offer an additional support or offer an additional viewpoint or whatever, because the co-teaching that's happening right now in the high school among content teachers is phenomenal, and the skills that I'm seeing are just really, really up to par, and I'm really pleased to be part of that and to be part of the community, and the kids are really embracing the idea. Like, I go into health class and there's still one student who's like, why are you back? And I was like, because we're reading today. But they're excited about it, and they're seeing that reading skills and the knowledge that comes from it is just, you know, it's found everywhere. So I'm really seeing a positive impact, even though it's only the 6 week for schools.
Great.
I would honestly, I think that the GXs have been super important for the high school, that they've really made each content teacher really dig into what it is that they teach and is important for teaching, and that's been a painful process, I think, a hard process when you're trying to really figure out what is it that I do. and being able to really articulate that. But I think that this year, people are feeling much more comfortable with what the GXs are, and then those GPs that kind of are those the content skills that we're using to practice those GX skills. And I think that it's been really nice to kind of see that we have a common language throughout each classroom in order to talk about what students are learning and doing.
Great, thank you. Any other Alex?
So, in listening to everybody talk,
Can I just do one thing first? For anybody that doesn't know, Alex Yin just came to us after Julian Portilla took a sabbatical from Champlain to go down to Mexico. He was down there about 3 weeks and was in that earthquake. But Alex took his. He's all right, and the family's okay. But Alex, fortunate for us, took his place for the rest of his term. So that's Alex Yin. For those who didn't know. Sorry, Alex.
and no, thank you. And it's great to listen to the presentation, because in many ways, sometimes the hardest part is when you read the mission, and all students will graduate from Winooski, all that, and it's hard to sometimes figure out how you're operationalizing how we're getting to the mission. And it sounds like there is a lot of work when I hear about these elements, and it's actually tied to the reading that you made us read for the book reading about like setting the foundation for the deeper community. And I'm kind of curious, are there ways that you all as the leadership board making the connection of the mission to what you're doing so that students, faculty, parents really understand that what you're doing is really operationalizing this mission. If you think about what the hearts thing about building that caring global and local community, showing up on time in the timeliness. You use the word authentic learning. When I hear about businesses, it's odd that I remember sitting through at my previous state where I was previously, all they wanted were people to show up on time at work, and those are things that are very important, and it sounds like you all are doing that. The question is, are we reiterating that mission and tying all the pieces together?
I know that at the elementary level, there's been a big push to get the family and community more aware of what we're doing and of the work that we've been doing. All teachers are now sending weekly communications home. Sarah Robb, our principal, sends a weekly communication home. And I know that as a leadership team, we're looking this year and next year into how to make that an important and transparent part of the process. And so it's something that I think everyone, now that we've got our gears going and everyone's head around it, now it's how do we communicate that clearly to parents and the community so that everyone sees the work that we're doing.
Also, to add to that, I think I've heard it, a feedback loop of teachers, students, families, also reflecting on the practice. So everyone's really engaged in that and providing feedback. It sounded like y'all were taking the feedback and really, orienting where we refine things to make it better for all.
I think in the high school, we revamped our advisory program. It's now about a half an hour. And so I think that's a time where that connection is going to be a little bit more clear, that we have the time and are building those relationships with our advisees and connecting with parents in a more intentional way.
Like I was going to say specifically, like this year with the FAST testing, before we would have benchmark testing and like I'd have all the data and some people would look at it and some people wouldn't, but like this year in advisories, they took the test in advisories, they were prepped beforehand what the test actually meant. There was a follow-up afterwards where they got their scores, they had to reflect on it. They were all spoken to about the fact that the expectation is this certain number, 1100, and that this prepares you for, like a general basic, ability to survive in American society. But if you have, larger expectations or aspirations, you might want to work harder. And so the idea of, like taking the learning and then putting it to a practical use. And then the other day we were talking about cell phone usage, and our advisory person said, hey, you know what, I read this really cool article, what if we were to read this article together as advisories, you know, to talk about the import. So we're really trying to build a sense that the students see where we're coming from, and that they can see what we're doing and why we want them to do it, and it's just becoming much more transparent. And I think the GXs as well as advisory is really helping that out.
I think it brings up a great point that, and school districts traditionally are not good at that. So they do not take the message of the operationalizing the mission, the end statement out to the public enough. And I think that that's something for us when we were, the communications work that the board was doing, some of the branding work that we're doing with Image internally and the website and those kinds of things. We need to bring that together and do a better job of that.
And part of the reason I bring that up is mainly because it's easy to do the reading and math scores like Michael has said here, right? But the thing that we're looking for in that bigger community as we're moving up is the teamwork, the collaboration, the kindness, the empathy that is often harder to show. And that's the stuff that, you know, I listen, I'm going, man, I wish I was in middle school or kindergarten all over again. Because, you know, you would develop these skills. It's the world that, you know, we're all trying to be living in. And sometimes there is not going to be a test to say how much you're empathetic, right? But if you can kind of show them that enough of this evidence that you're doing these things, it kind of makes it easier for us to talk to parents and have them better understand what you're doing. And also from a school board, like as a member of the school board, I can better articulate why.
Right. And I think we're kind of moving out of that time where we, like I mentioned at the beginning, where we brought staff in, we got the supports in place, and now that kind of next couple of steps are, okay, we know where we're going, we have programmatic supports in place, staffing in place. Now, how do we begin to talk to people more clearly about that? Because we've been so busy doing the work.
Right. And truthfully, this is the fun part, right?
Yeah.
Like, you get to highlight the good stuff that you're doing. And so I'm not trying to say it's a negative or anything. It really is just like making sure that we boast.
It may be something that becomes part of the budget conversation this year, right? About how do you support that as a board?
Right, how to keep it sustainable, and then sort of radiate it out so that we are creating our narrative, reshaping our narrative around the
And I think
positives.
that is one of our big focus points for the year, and we've been talking about it for a couple of years, and that is enabling our community. I would argue that those around the state, broader than just in Winooski, understand what it is we're doing and the good work we're doing, but we're not bringing it well from a board perspective, as well as we could, into our own community to let people know. And we talk about getting with realtors, we talk about getting, you know, changing the narrative there when people come to buy a house. It's not all about test scores, but we don't tell them what it is all about. Right? So those are the things we're really after. So this gives us that little extra something to go and have that discussion with. So for all the hard work you do, thank you. Anybody have anything else?
Just a key piece of the expeditionary learning too, which we'll build in the community, is celebrating that learning with other people and inviting people in. So that experience as a sixth grader, you sort of limit the audience because it's their first time doing it. But the hope is, as a seventh grader is going through the experience, that will be their second time. So the audience will get bigger. And then at eighth grade, the audience would be even bigger. And a huge part of that would be bringing that learning into a community, like maybe having something at Scout or some of the waterworks, all these other places that are out there where other people can sort of walk in and see. And I think that was a huge draw to why we wanted to do this, because it really does bring a lot of people together to celebrate these cool things that kids are doing.
And so the expeditionary learning is only started just in the sixth grade.
Nope, so I didn't do a good job speaking to that
Oh,
part.
sorry.
So each, so sixth graders are starting with the Circus one, and that's the team I work on, so I naturally was speaking of that. But each student in the middle school will experience 2 expeditionary learning units this year. The first one for all students is humanities, and then the second one will be STEM. So it'll happen twice a year, and they're about 8 to 12 weeks.
Very good. Anything else? Awesome. Thank you very much for your
Thank
time. I
you.
know you've had a long day, but we greatly appreciate you coming in.
Thanks.
Thanks. All right, public comments. Infinite, welcome.
I just wanted to check in actually about something different, other than transportation tonight, in addition to the transportation piece. Parents and Youth for Change, this past March, got an extra $10,000 grant from the Nellie Mae Education Foundation to address post-election community needs, you know, the rising tension after the 2016 election. And so what we have done with those resources is provide the infrastructure and support for students in Burlington, Winooski, and South Burlington to create community forums, student-led community forums. And so we met throughout the summer beginning, actually Indra Acharya led the project over the summertime. He coordinated all three schools. He recruited students from all three schools. And then when he left, we took on 3 other people to replace him. And so that work is now culminating into student-led community forums that are going to begin this coming Monday here in Winooski. So these young folks, that's going to be at 5 o'clock in the cafeteria there. So, you know, these young folks are going to be talking about having real discussions about real issues that they, you know, that are important to them. And one of them actually is GXs. You know, talk about GXs. Some other topics are going to be pretty heavy, but I think, you know, it will be worth having a conversation that it seems like these, you know, young people have been wanting to have, you know, for quite some time. And so we're bringing in some mediation moderators from Champlain Mediation Program. We also have folks from the Peace and Justice Center helping us out on the project. Spectrum Youth and Family Services have been really, you know, helpful in helping to recruit some of the young folks over at South Burlington, and also their staff is helping out with the project. So I just wanted to share that with you, that this coming Monday, you know, there are going to be, there's going to be a community forum here Wednesday. The Burlington High School will be having theirs. And then November 6th, South Burlington High School having their own community forum.
So each location is specific to the community?
That's right.
Okay, so Winooski's is Monday night at 5 here at the school. Thank you.
That's correct. We will have childcare. We'll be providing interpreters. There'll be food and transportation. Actually, we will be busing folks, vanning folks from Elm Street and from the Bryan Center. Yeah, I think that's about it. As for transportation, Mike, I just wanted to address your most recent email, which ensuring, you know, a clear understanding of the busing policy, because we actually, Parents Youth for Change, we have very little understanding of what the status is of the busing policy. You know, we got it in the budget passed, and the only time we've heard from the district is when there's some kind of hiccup that might put the transportation pilot under threat. So it's really difficult for us to communicate to folks, you know, exactly what the status is up there. You have a question?
No, keep going. I'll get to it when you're done.
So it's not, you know, as far as we were concerned, you know, the transportation pilot was gonna begin after Thanksgiving break. Right?
So,
We understand
We've-
that the district has a lot of priorities.
no, we've had a discussion, Infinite, and that discussion was that we put it out for bid. We needed 3 bids, we got 1. It was 3x what we budgeted, you knew that. We talked about that. So, given that, we could not start the pilot immediately and guarantee that it was gonna start in November. So at this point, without the negotiations having been completed at the time, which you also knew about, we are in a little bit of limbo as to who would drive the buses. We don't have a contract with anybody. We finally got a contract in place with the staff, so we at least can start putting a budget together. Those things are known. Those things were very clear.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Those things should have been very clear.
okay.
So,
Because I'm, I'm not in those negotiations, and I'm not in that process, you know.
no, the piece about, and I don't want to leave this as an argument, but it should have been clear based on our last meeting that we didn't get a bid that met the budget line item that we talked about the last time. So, you know, I just want to make sure that it's clear that right now, we will not be starting in November, at the end of November. We're looking at when that will work, because we've got to go back out to bid. We've got to see if we can get something closer to the line item that we had in the budget. It's likely we can find a little bit more money in there somewhere if the bid comes out above the 50,000. But does that mean we start at the end of November, the end of December, or middle of January? Don't know that yet. Those I thought we had been pretty clear on.
So I remember the 2, so one was the school board meeting where we did interviews. I think Meg was there when we first got the information. And is that how, it's kind of like how I felt like that's where we communicated our decisions, because that was the first meeting that we were brought in on the fact that the negotiations was happening and there was some iffiness around, we needed to make sure we were secure before we secured those funds. And then we talked about it again at our September board meeting of saying that we needed to hold until some clearer numbers came in around our budget to make sure we were solvent enough to move forward with it. And it sounds like now, it looks like we're hoping, our goal is to get another bid out again by the end of this month.
Right.
To hopefully begin mid-January. So is the only way we communicate with you all is through board meetings? That's,
Yeah, I was under the impression that Meg, having been involved in that discussion, and you and she are one voice.
Yeah, typically, you know,
That's why it surprised me.
It's actually helpful to have something in writing, you know, via email that we can share with people. Okay, because, you know, verbal communication can sometimes fall short of,
like
you know,
telephone.
right.
Okay.
So, you know, in terms of accuracy, you
Okay.
know, if we have something to read to folks, you know, if we have something, you know, solid to share with them.
Right.
we'd be able to do that.
So in the superintendent's report, in the minutes of our meetings, this has been highlighted as we've gone along. Is that a source of your information at all?
It can be.
It needs to be, because the information is in there for partial. We can certainly look at trying to find another way other than the minutes,
Okay.
but that's how we document what it is we talk about. And, I mean,
So it doesn't seem like either that we've established a clear communication system with Parents for Change, right? As a board,
Right.
like as a
Right.
governing body, that we
Yeah.
could establish a way of communicating so that we're more clear, so that
It's true.
if we do have these, since we are trying to work together to help our families, that maybe we could figure out how to embed it into an
Yep.
email so that it is a direct communication in the meeting tonight. This is what we talked about in terms of some of the concerns that have come up from our families.
True, because your email was very clear, right? The most recent one that you sent.
mhm.
So yes, that would be really
Okay.
great.
Okay.
I just have one other thing to share with you. It's a study that CCRPC did on outsourcing and privatizing school transportation and the concerns around that. There's about 5 copies there.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that if you you haven't already read it, you wasn't already aware of it, that, you have that information.
Can you break it down into 20 seconds?
No, I'm
Okay.
gonna leave that with
All
you.
right. All right.
I'm gonna leave that with you.
All right.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you. All right. Any other comments? All right. Moving on, consent agenda. I would accept, motion to accept the consent agenda as written.
So moved.
Any other comments from within?
There were a couple of celebrations. Wait for it, wait for it. Wait, when the JFK received the Vermont PBS Merit Award 2016, 2017. That's shout out loud worthy,
Yep, yesterday.
right? That's awesome.
The bar grant was a pretty incredible
first one.
acknowledgement of the work
That's amazing.
we do. I did
Yeah.
pull one piece out of there, Sean, that I wanted to ask specifically about, and that was with regards to the. Hang on 1 second here. See if I can get this thing to behave. For the consolidated federal program. Usually we receive the CFP award and money has been received in July, however, become markedly more cumbersome and the AOE is overwhelmed reviewing applications. Anything we can do to advocate?
No, I think we're almost done. So we got the edits down to Title 2A. There was 3 edits. We submitted them on Monday afternoon, and they're under review. And I heard back from them today that the person who's supposed to review them was out sick today. We expect a response and an approval, and then a release of the grant award by late this week, early next week.
Okay. And that was a consolidated federal program.
Yep.
The CFP funding
Okay.
got held up in the
Title
AOE.
1, Title 2A money, so.
Right. Which, yeah, you would hope that you don't have to be too, okay. Any other comments
And
from
we
within?
do think that with this winter transportation pilot, that we hopefully can get to bidding out again by the end of October.
Yes.
That's reasonable.
Yep.
Awesome.
It's on our checklist after issuing new contracts, enrolling people in health plans, and putting together retroactive pay.
Right.
3 months,
And building
3
a
months
budget for
delay.
FY19.
Yes. Right,
So
we're
yeah,
almost there.
the piece for me is just the volume of work these guys have to do with the
Yeah,
late
absolutely.
jump, the lack of a bid, original or I'd say a reasonable bid the first time out on a transportation pilot. So everything is in a delay mode. All right.
Are there any new leads for potential companies, though? I mean, is it?
Yeah.
One of the South Burlington School District, we had talked to them before, and they were interested, and they chose at that point not to put in a bid. But we've talked to them further and are hopeful that they would also bid.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Because they do have the
Thank
capacity you mentioned, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion there? All right. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay, consent accepted. So executive limitations here, we'll start with the quarterly financial management report. Typically go just straight to the bottom line on these, at least for starters, and that is projected $80,000 to the positive. We know how fickle that can be as we go through time, but it's at least on the positive end. Some of the variances, you saw $86,000, a little over, mostly based on tuition and expenses and special ed. Again, those can be pretty large swingers year to year, and item to item, not to mention there is a good reimbursement, but you gotta flow along first. Instructional support, there was just a small change in that one. The favorable balance, I believe, was $14K negative, but that didn't change the bottom line at 80 at all. And then the administrative support, piece had a positive balance of 13, 16, and 17K in the IT operations and fiscal services. So the line items are close. The budget's is rolling along. We'll get all the contracts going here and hopefully close a lot of the rest of this out. There are copies if you guys didn't have them. I don't know if anybody wanted them not on soft copy, but if anybody wanted them, they're here. A couple of other things I wanted to touch on, though, as we did go through this, and that is, let me just get to my notes here. The fund balance, we've got actually 3 fund balances in here right now. I wanted to just touch on 2 of them. The Medicaid fund balance has got very specific uses. So that is essentially, it's going to be used within for specific purposes, and that's not something we'll touch. And Sean's got all the rules and regulations, so we'll work with that one. The general fund balance that's showing in here, $266,000, is those monies that were left a little bit at a time. In this case, $40K here for a year. And there's 266,000 in there now. That's the fund that our auditors have suggested that we maintain in case we end up with an overspending situation. In this general fund balance, we can do basically anything we need to do with it to keep from going into a negative state. So very limited rules on what that needs to be. So hold on to that thought for a second. And then there is the capital budget fund. There's $380-something thousand left in there after some capital improvement work we've done over time. That was up over, I don't know, 550, 600,000 at one time, but the roof and bathrooms and other facilities upgrades that we've done and brought it down to 380. One of the things I'm going to bring up a little bit later is, as we get into the budget season, do we want to put limits, minimums, refreshers in these as we go into the budget? For instance, the $380,000 in the capital reserve. Does that make sense? Is it enough? Do we want to put a limit of, let's call it 400,000? And then in this budget, we'll have to add a line item for 20,000 to put in there. Do we let it run all the way down to 0? So as we get into budget season, these are the kinds of questions we're going to have to try to see if we need. The general fund balance at 266, is that good? I think the auditor would tell us it's on the low end, Sean, I think from the
last
discussions
time
we've
we
had.
asked the question, the auditor said for an organization of our size and knowing our operating budget and our facilities
Variability.
planning, that 250 to 400 would be the range that they would recommend to keep in that fund balance.
And that's just to make sure you don't slip off the edge somewhere and have to go borrow money for general spending. So we'll have that discussion again, but I wanted to bring it up while it was fresh in here because we won't hit the FMR again before we get into budget season. So we'll have that discussion again.
I think one thing to add that, 5 years ago, traditionally what was happening was any favorable balance that was coming out of the operating budget was going straight to capital reserve. So, one of the things that the auditor talked about is that you can, as a board, decide. Because once it goes to capital reserve, it has to be used for only those purposes, so it's more limited than if you have it in that general fund balance. So, that's a little bit of a different behavioral change or decision-making than in the past for the board to consider.
So those 2 items will come back up again, so. All right. So any other questions come up in relation to the FMR?
It's quarter one, it's
Quarter
early.
one is- Yes, absolutely. So,
Those are still high though.
all right, very good. Any questions do come up, I'm sure we can get answers. I think these are punched, so those are yours.
Thanks.
All right, and then, the board I'm one slip down, one superintendent monitoring report on financial planning and budgeting. Here again, we're gonna do, as we had discussed, we're gonna do the review and accept as we go now through what is, I think, the third pass of these. Let me just start with Sean. Anything in here that's materially changed from?
Nothing has
from
materially
previously?
changed, only updating some of the years. For example, in evidence for number one, instead of writing the dates for every audited financial statement, that I'm kind of keeping it to 2 years, and we don't have a completed 2017 yet, so that's not included. And then in evidence for number four, I just went back 2 years in budgets.
I don't think going back more than 3 years serves a whole lot of useful purpose except to force you to change the dates more.
Right, and then in the
As long as they're
previous monitoring report, it
valuable.
does, so the dates will kind of run together. If somebody was to go back to, 3 monitoring reports, they would see the dates have a nice progression to them too.
All right.
And she's gonna sign it, right, her letter?
Yes. I always forget that, don't I? Is
Yeah.
it, where's the letter on this one?
On the end.
Of section 2.
No, at the
Or
very
evidence.
end. Page 6.
Where, you're looking at the 2.4?
Am I looking at the wrong one? Could be.
So I don't think that this one had a letter
Yeah.
of support.
Okay.
No, yeah, I didn't
So I'm looking at the wrong one.
see one in this one.
But we are on financial planning and budget, policy 2.4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So from everything I've seen,
So that was
this
on 2.8.
covers both our intent and the data that we've been given. To me, seems to work for what we need. Any other discussion?
It's good.
Okay. I would accept a motion to accept the monitoring report on policy 2.4 financial planning and budgeting as presented.
So moved?
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Sean, thank you.
Sorry.
Then we get down into our two board monitoring reports. Again, trying to get through these this year. We did 3.2 and 3.3 this time. So we'll start with 3.2, which is accountability of the superintendent. So this policy here then is the superintendent's the board's only link to operational achievement and conduct, so that all authority and accountability of staff as far as the board is concerned is considered to the authority and accountability of the superintendent. The rest of it goes on to, again, based on the way the policies are all written, it goes through the negatives. The board will never give instruction to persons who report directly or indirectly to the superintendent. Board will not evaluate either formally or informally any staff other than the superintendent. I believe in both of those cases, I have not heard or seen, and I'll leave Sean to you to confirm anybody evaluating the staff, except hopefully to show them in a positive light. Board reviews successful superintendent performance is demonstrated by accomplishments of board stated ends and avoidance of board prescribed means. So I put on this one partial compliance, that's policy 3.2.3. And that was mostly based on getting our monitoring reports completed and in place. So the time horizon to get those back is, I think, the end of this year as we get things closed out. And then the monitoring reports on the ends we're still working on. I think the best that I've ever heard it is when we had our original education with Val and Ange Odato from Orange County, right? He said we're in our 5th year of implementation. So I think we're kind of on that same path, continuing to do it slowly, do it well without creating a ton of churn as we go along. So
How long have we been
Um,
in policy governance?
I think it's
So-
been about, it's
Four.
at least 4
'Cause
years,
we've been on
yeah,
it for 6,
yeah.
right? Yeah, 4.
So I think we're on track. I don't want to
Okay.
create a point where we get to so much confusion about changes and forcing data that we get something we don't want. But I think we're on a good trajectory here. The only change I think I would like to make in here is in 322. It says the data is based on evidence of a formal or informal evaluation of any staff members based on a lack of evidence of any formal or informal evaluation. I would update that
Thank you.
piece to be that there is none. So without any evidence of that, I think we're okay. Any other comments on 3.2? And any clarification on what we think it says? All right, I would accept a motion to accept the monitoring report on the accountability of the superintendent policy 3.2.
So moved.
Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. 3.3. So this one here's kind of set the standard for where we'll go for the rest of the policies here. I got I think I've got one more to finish up developing, at least putting the first pass down. What you see, I think, in this report is a partial and not the completed piece that you just got handed. So we did some work over the weekend. End of last week, I had asked Tori to help me sanity check. It's always easier to do some of this when there's already something on paper. At least get it started. So Tori did a good job, asking the questions and putting in a little bit more detail, obviously, than was in the first one. You saw there was some pretty open statements there.
Right, so you can see the before and after, and so as y'all look through it too, noticing where it shifted.
I'll give just a few minutes for a quick read. I apologize, we'll get these done a little bit beforehand. I'll explain in a minute. the things, want to just keep in mind with this particular policy is it does touch on, us in this particular piece when we're looking through these to understand our compliance to our own policies for our behavior as a board. We don't, we want to react to these policies as they're written today, not how we would like to be reacting or responding to them at some point in time. So we do always have the ability to change the policy, but we can't base decisions on what happens or how we deal with it based on the way we want it to be, rather on the way it is written today. So as we go through these, if there's things that we see that we should potentially change, like we're going to do the annual agenda planning in March rather than in June, the simple one, we have to make that change in the policy and then act accordingly. So, you know, in the case of the last one, interpret this to mean that we can adjust the ends and or the executive limitations, but we have to measure the performance against them based on how they are at the time. And I think so far we've done that. So, any other thoughts on this one? We hit it?
I think by and large, I mean, the content is all great and the language largely is really, I think, very clear. Just on 3.33
Mm-hmm.
for data based on the absence of issues pertaining to board overreaching its boundaries, that seems just a little bit nebulous to me. Does that mean,
Okay.
I mean, we're going to be judged on an evidence of no evidence for something that's, is that what that means? Or what actually would be evidence? I mean,
Yeah, I think what we're looking for in here ultimately ends up being the superintendent's view of how we're practicing here. When you think about where we've been over the last 8 years, had this been in place and being followed, and you get somebody who wants to come in and dictate a lot of this stuff.
I definitely get the content of what it's intended to. I just mean like what the evidence is. Is that just Sean's subjective reaction that he feels we're overreaching, or is there some other like criteria? Does it come up as an issue on our agenda?
Well, it's a good thing you brought that up, because the second one is database in the meeting notice, the meeting minutes to show how we're spending our time. And so maybe the better way to address this is to leave it at the data based on the meeting minutes.
Sure.
Of how we spend our time focused on this, because I do think
Okay.
that what I think
Rather
you're saying
than
too
being
is
subjective.
that the way we're describing that data is yet another interpretation
Okay.
of the policy itself.
Rather than actually being data,
Right.
which the minutes
Do you
would
have a thought about that?
support.
No,
Yeah.
the way you said it, like, you know, I get like the absence is the easiest way to say it, right? But what absence of what?
Right.
Right.
Because it's almost like the way we were saying the one about feedback on staff, based on lack of evidence of
Right.
formal, informal evaluations that we provide staff members. You know, that was yet another place where we've said the absence of this information is the fact that we're following our policy. But I do think in this case, and I'm not sure about this other one on 3.2.2, we could remove that absence piece, because we're just that's another reinterpretation of what we should be doing in this policy, and therefore our meeting minutes will be the indicator of how we focused our time.
Yeah, so
on-
just start the whole data piece with data-based and meeting minutes.
Yeah,
Will
which
show.
will show if the board is spending time focused on the future and
That the
beginning to
board-
focus on evidence
Yeah.
for outcomes and progress towards our end goals.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I don't know if there's another
No,
way
that's a
of
happy
measuring that.
compromise.
Y-
Okay.
You know, as we get into the next round of this, we'll continue to dissect it and move it cleanly too. So we'll pull out the first two sentences on that one. I'd also recommend that this is data-based in meeting minutes will show if the board is, rather than data-based in meeting minutes will show that the board is spending time. Change if with that. You got that one? This if. Take the if out and we'll
Yeah.
insert that. So it just shows that we are spending our time focus there. All right. Anything else on that one? All right. I would accept a motion with the one adjustment we just talked about in 333 to clarify the data. I would accept a motion to accept it as written.
Motion moved.
So moved. There you go. All right.
Moving that motion
All right. Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Then, moving down. Your co-pilot Destiny didn't quite arrive at the terminal tonight, so you're on your own. Student
All right.
report.
So the student report's gonna be a little short, I guess. My partner in crime's not here. But I guess I'll start with Spirit Week, which just happened, I believe, last week. It's pretty great. You see everyone in the halls with the same theme, so I think there was a sense of unity there. Monday was Jersey Sports Day. Tuesday was Twin Day. It's kind of scary, but you see pairs of people getting everyone mixed up. We've got Hoodie Day. We've got Hoodie Day, pretty casual. Black and White Day, and Green White Day, which was also Spartan Day. The same day we had a community meeting, so good to see everyone in green and white in the same room. Following with Peace Jam. Peace Jam recently took a trip to New York City, visiting the United Nations Conference, which is very important to them. I remember talking to one of the students there, and she said it was very eye-opening to see the big leaders there talking, and they got a chance to visit and take photos. Advisory student rep meetings are officially happening. These reps were elected by the advisory themselves. There's one rep for each advisory in the high school. They meet, I believe, once a week or once every 2 weeks to speak about what they want to see happening with advisory itself, with college and career readiness, and creating a sense of community. I believe the last advisory rep meeting topic was what they wanted to talk about in circling. The big focus was on relieving stress, since I know it's the first 6 weeks of school, but there's a lot of stress going on with everything that's piling up, PSATs and SATs and that kind of stuff. So that was what advisory student reps are mostly focused on right now. There have been a lot of actually high school and elementary interactions that are happening from classes. Effective Communications is starting to mentor with the younger kindergarten classes by reading books to them and helping with drawing little cartoons and stuff like that. I think you could see some pictures on Winooski Learns, the Twitter account. Digital photography class has been having photo shoots with the elementary school, hanging out with them at the playground and focusing on the themes for their projects, for their art projects. Lots of fundraisers going on right now. Yearbook has been selling Dan's Chocolates, which is a middle school and high school fundraiser. Bet you've seen them coming around. The business students are fundraising for their big New York City trip by selling coupon books. I'm also selling, so if you're interested, let me know.
I got hit up by Corbin today.
Yeah, he's been running around. Students have been running around these past 2 weeks with a lot of fundraising. Prom committee starting early too. They've are enforcing. They're selling candies this year in the cafeteria to promote the fall festivities. Middle school is preparing for the Spartan Games next week. I think Spartans Games is Spartans in Motion, so they're preparing for the competition. I think that's all I have.
The one thing I would add to that, and Alex and Destiny have been working on how do we help them to get middle and elementary stuff into their report, because they are very busy. They're very engaged in the high school, and it's sometimes hard to get a hold of other principals and get some of that information and stuff. So the one thing that I know about that she may not, that I think is of real importance is the morning meetings and having parents invited into the elementary to come to the morning meetings in the classrooms, which is fantastic. So, and I was down there today and saw like 7 parents coming out of a classroom who came in, and you know that's a real foundation of responsive classroom and how we set the tone each day, and teachers get to look at the kids. And so I think it's great modeling also for parents to kind of see how we do that, and we're getting great parent participation in that so far. Great.
Very good. All set?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
So next is one of the things that annually at the VSBA meeting down in Lake Maury, the annual meeting, have a review of the resolutions, the things that Vermont School Board Association is going to advocate on behalf of school boards for. So in here, there's a list of the items that they're going to go forward with, you know, a recommendation to pass, don't pass, take no position on these particular resolutions. And so we have a vote to go into that, and I think, Sean, you have the proxy for this guy here for us. So there's a few different items in here. There's the innovation zones item, supporting legislation authorizing the creation of innovation zones to exempt supervisory unions and/or districts from specific regulations or policy in order to create models of world-class education systems that can be scaled across the state. So I don't know if you've got any specific other than our current in-house.
No, I mean, there are others. I think this is, like it says, it's been in the agenda for world-class education for 3 or 4 years, but there was a lot in there, and there's been a lot that's been accomplished. But I think this is one of the things, there's been a review of that document in the last 6 months by different organizations like VSBA and VSA. And so I think this was one of the things that came up, and the VSBA really wanted to support that, so that we can kind of reduce, hopefully, some of the red tape that sometimes is associated with trying to do things differently.
The second proposal was one that started in motion this past year, and that is statewide health insurance benefits for school employees. So that's proposal 2. I think we've had
Yeah, so
quite a bit on that
the
one.
second one, there's a bunch of stuff in there, and if some of you may remember, I got invited to be a part of that working group last year that's cited in the background, the VSBA, VSA cost containment work group recommendations. That document of recommendations was put forward to the legislature in the spring and so forth, which I think may have played a part in some of the stuff that happened, although it was not accomplished. But there's a couple of components to it. There's about the ratios. There's the
and that's the ratios
buyout.
based on equalized pupil rather than just straight head counts.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And then the last one is there's 2 more fact finders. So in the collective bargaining to adjust the standards. And then the 5th one around reserve funds and surplus amounts really had to do with the incredible amount of deferred maintenance that's going on around the state because of the tightness of budgets in the last 6 to 8 years. A lot of districts and supervisory unions have deferred maintenance because they've cut other things, or they've put money back into reduced taxes instead of capital projects. So I think, I was a part of that. I mean, so clearly I would recommend to you that those would all be viable resolutions to support all 5 pieces of a single resolution, actually. But,
Yep.
is it?
And then I think that was it, right? Just those 2 with other sections. Any clarification on any of those?
Those 5 all seem very in line with what we should be supporting.
Yeah. And the only other one I recommended, I'm hoping that they bring it next year, is that as the legislature leaves each year, they give the word on what they would like us to do from a budgetary perspective for the following year
Yeah.
before it gets to January and the budgets are all done. They're not gonna be no less accurate in January and doing it in June than they were in January, so it's, hopefully we get some kind of guidance before that. But that'll be, we can try to push for that for next year. All right, I think we need approval. No, nothing on that one. All right. So then, from a policy standpoint, we've got two tonight. Whoops, sorry. Be right with you. The graduation requirements and public participation at board meetings. Graduation requirements, interesting discussion we had when we were setting this up, and that was, do you have, what we have in place right now is the first one you've got here, 5124, and if I remember right, it's pretty close to the model. It wasn't too far from. I
From,
mean, have
from
a
the
model.
old model on just graduation, what you have in your packet is the new proficiency-based only graduation requirements model that just came out recently.
So one is for, essentially for our juniors and seniors who are graduating against a credits-based model, and our freshmen and sophomore who will be looking to graduate from a proficiency-based, but we don't have anything in place right now on the proficiency-based piece.
Well, so we do, about
With
2.5
few.
years ago, May 2015, the last time that the board revisited this policy. If you look at our local policy, at the very end of number 1, it says satisfactory completion of 24 units of credit or the equivalent proficiencies. We basically added that language, and then we added below the course requirements the education quality standards, literacy, mathematical content, and so forth, A through G. So that the policy gave us the flexibility to graduate students either way. My recommendation at this point, given that we are in the middle right now, would be that we remain with the policy that we have, because it gives us the flexibility to graduate students around the equivalent proficiencies and the credits at this point, and that we revisit this, I would say, in 12 to 18 months when we're ready to consider a full-on proficiency-based graduation policy. And I think the model gives us a really good place to start. And then in addition, we put in this other policy that came from the New England Secondary School Consortium, which has been a leader in New England on proficiencies. And so this was one of their examples too, just to give you another set to kind of look at. It's kind of ground in Maine.
Kind of curious from a practical perspective. Being Destiny, you said you were a junior, right?
Yeah.
So you're working through the credits-based.
Yes.
How much interaction do you have with the proficiency-based component, and how do you see an interaction between the two setups, or do you even notice?
I actually think the whole school is noticing it, because I think it's taking a toll with how parents are understanding it too, with report cards, because the report cards the junior and senior class are receiving also have the graduation requirements on there, but their student is graduating with credits. So it's kind of from the junior senior viewpoint, we do see it, but we don't understand it, and I think it should be defined for the junior and seniors that, like, it feels like we have to deal with it, but at the same time not have to deal with it, if that makes any sense.
From the proficiency-based piece?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I think for juniors and seniors, we understand that it's there, but we don't understand what we have to do with it, I guess, because our report cards say that what the GXs are that we are working on, because we have to do the JUNPO and the JANPO and the presentations that focus on GXs. So the answer is yes, we do notice it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, family with a junior and a freshman, was gonna say a junior and a sophomore, that's cutting a little tight. A junior and a freshman would probably really notice the difference in the expectations. Do we? It's gonna be messy, I'm sure. Are you hearing anything about the transition?
What
and
I'm hearing
crossover?
is it's confusing.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that is, that's gonna continue for a while.
Okay. 2 years.
It is.
I'm so glad Rebecca's a senior.
Yeah, because you're straddling systems right now, and you have different components. It's not just the graduation requirements; it's the instruction, it's the assessment, it's the grading, the reporting, the transcript. So it's really it's layered, and so what Destiny's experiencing is there is proficiency-based instruction and assessment going on in practically all of her classrooms, I suspect.
Yes, all of them.
And she's getting proficiency-based feedback on how she's doing on the GXs and sometimes probably the GPs as well. But she's getting a final grade that's going on a transcript, and she's getting a credit count.
To keep consistent with the old path.
Yes.
Okay.
So it can be hard to know if they're really doing well when you're reading just that feedback on the proficiency part until they actually get the grade, and then you're like, oh wow, they actually passed, because you don't really know the answer until the project is completed.
And that
And
is
that's-
the newest part, the progressions.
Yes, and that is the
newest
hardest part
because,
for parents.
Yeah, and so that's the part that we have done the least amount of communication with students and parents on.
Okay.
I think the GXs, people know what they are. They're ground in instruction. It's the articulation from the school about now the GPs and how does that translate to a grade and to a transcript, college application and entrance. All work that we're continuing to do, but it is
Yes.
clear as mud.
Bet you'll be glad when the junior and senior classes go.
It's a necessary evil in a transition, I guess.
They've had a hard time with
Well,
the transition
and
themselves.
what you really,
so.
the rule that you operate by is do no harm.
Mhm.
You know, because you don't want a kid to not have an opportunity, post-secondary opportunity, because we can't articulate, you know, what they've done. So right now, kind of what we're doing is both. So that somebody can, you know, colleges can grab onto either one, whichever one they think is easier for them to access, and make a decision about an applicant.
Now, is colleges going to be changing their outlook moving forward, or no?
Colleges have come out and said, this is
Yeah.
fine with us.
Good.
We know how to do this. I would suspect, I'd be curious to hear what you have to say, Alex, but I suspect there's going to have to be a shifting of resources in college admissions at some point to do it well. Because the risk, I think, is saying, yeah, we know how to do this, so then not really looking at it deeply and just looking at scores. Which, if you're looking at a public university who's getting, you know, 80,000 applications in a year, you can't do that with your existing admissions staffing. So I think, you know, some schools, some colleges have a lot more experience and they're set up already to do it, and some are not.
And we're all gonna love it anyways, because then we don't have to do the U.S. News and World Report rankings, which we all hate,
Right.
because it's all based off of random scores.
Right. Yeah.
Just dealing with different data,
It is.
different information, and how do you gauge? And I think a lot of it ends up being, correct me if I'm wrong, is we took 5 kids from this school last year and they all seem to be doing well, or getting a history over time. Does that?
We haven't. I mean, we haven't looked at that level of data at UVM, but like, you know, it's something we're looking at to gauge how the proficiency. I mean, obviously, a publicly and grant university in Vermont should be. I'm hoping that we're on track to understand that we're all moving to a proficiency
Yes.
base, and
Yep.
if we're not, you know, we're
Yeah.
you know 2 years behind, because we are. You know, I think 25% of our students are from.
Well, and higher ed has been very supportive, you know, because I know when I was at CVU, that was one of the things that parents got, they were like, oh my gosh, well, what's going to happen? You know, my kid isn't going to be able to get into the college or university that I think they should get into. And we began bringing in panels of admissions people from Middlebury and Boston College and UVM and Champlain and everybody from the admissions office came to the same, they said, yes, this is okay. We know how to do this. We do this already with some high schools and homeschool students. We need to figure out in some places, how do we scale this so that we can do it well and with depth.
All right, so recommendation here then is to stay with the policy we have now, but put it back into the loop with, do you want to do it in a year? Do you want to do it end of next year? We'll have one May, kind of out, not this May, but
Let's see,
18
it's
months from now,
October.
brings it out to the 19. April
Yeah.
19,
Yeah.
you have one class,
Left.
the last one leaving.
I'd say
That would be the
early
closeout.
spring of 19. So that gives us some time to have it
Rather
in
than
place.
3
for the-
years, right, and then we'll have a,
So this is just because it's like an experimental design almost, and if we can't take advantage of this opportunity of both, it'd be interesting to just see how juniors and seniors are actually using both sets of information to apply to colleges, so that when the next wave that doesn't have it, we can hear and offer advice on how to use the proficiency to their advantage as they're applying to universities. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard.
Yeah.
And so, but if you can, if there's some way to like kind of gauge and think about those things, this is the time to do it, because
It's going to be less evident on the it's barely evident on the transcript for the students who will be graduating this year and next year, because it'll be spoken to in the profile. More so than anything. It'll be after that. I think what will be interesting is to ask Destiny and students who are graduating this year, a couple years into college, did the proficiency-based instruction, do you feel like that helped you? Because they had kind of a mixed bag through high school and in preparation for college.
And please note that I'm not trying to put that on the schools, because I know
Yeah,
trying
yeah.
to attract students is hard, but as your peers are coming back and providing that feedback, that would be really cool to have.
Yeah.
See, and that's where I think the colleges need to get on board, is how their teaching styles, because they don't teach proficiency based, they still teach tests based, and we're no longer teaching kids how to take tests. So that they struggle.
It's starting to shift too, in some
It is.
places.
Yeah, and it depends on where direction you're headed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
all right. Any other changes, Sean, in the current policy, other than,
No.
okay. So, we'll have this come back in consent the next time, because we'll do these in 2 pieces, okay. Next one, policy 8312, public participation at board meetings. I saw the model policy here is essentially the same as the one we have in place. I didn't see any real major differences
No, because
between
this
them.
came up, I remember the board brought it up it must have been in 2015, spring, when you
Yeah.
approved it. And either because we didn't have one or the one we had was not adequate. And it was really based on the model,
Yeah,
which hasn't
okay.
changed.
Any adjustments to what we have with what's in there now? All good?
Just a quick question.
Yep.
The only difference I saw was on public input on items not on the agenda.
Mhm.
We don't have a number 3, the chair shall rule out of order any presentation. Was there a reason we didn't put that in ours?
I didn't even
It
notice.
is there, but it's not numbered, isn't it?
Oh, I thought that was just like fine print at the end. Sorry.
No, I think you're right, but it needs to be numbered, so that's a good catch.
Okay, just slipped out of
Sorry. Just a quick
orientation,
Yeah.
no. All right. Other than that, any thoughts and no adjustments there? Okay. Very good. Then, brings us to, another board monitoring report. 4.5, agenda planning. This one I believe was already done. Yeah, so this one had been done for some period. And just in the interest of trying to get these things closed up, any comments? This was a relatively brief one, for the most part. And the agenda planning is basically set to incorporate the things that we do and lay it out in advance, so. Any thoughts there? Okay. The only place in conclusion of the very first one, it says June of 17. You go down one page, right here. We're doing it right now. Timeline for this will be out of compliance for the timing because it discussed trying to remember what my comment was here, sorry.
The timing of doing the agenda? Be reviewed in February? Is that what you're talking about, the timing?
Yeah,
And approved
being
in
reviewed
March?
in June.
Well, the interpretation is saying that the annual agenda will be reviewed in February, approved in March.
Yeah.
For our reorganization, right?
Yeah. Oh, right, no, so that's okay with the June, because I think what we wanted to do is move this to our June meeting from that March meeting, so we can leave it just like it is. But I think
Take out the year?
no, it would just, June regular board meeting, right,
Right, we don't have to have
Yes.
the year in there.
right.
Do we need that to be in the interpretation, or is that just the data, or that's just the
I think that's just in the conclusion of how we get back into compliance. But I think we've been doing it in June rather than in March. With the new board members we want, I think it's better to get them on board and then do the, this is approving the annual agenda,
Right.
right?
And we want to approve it in June to start September
When we,
and moving around.
right.
So do we need to have in the interpretation that the annual agenda will be reviewed in March and reviewed in February to be approved in March? Do we need to have that in the interpretation? Because when we're coming in on February, that year, that annual agenda has already been approved that prior June, right? So it's kicking September, October, November, flipping around to February. New organization comes in March, but the agenda's already set. That annual agenda's already set.
Yeah, actually, you know what, this is
Well-
just a little bit different in that it's defining the things that need to be in the agenda. And I
So it's
think
really for the
we're
prior
okay,
year?
we're okay there. Yep. I think we're good with that one because
Okay.
it's defining the things that need to be in the agenda. And I
see.
believe we've gotten,
That we eventually approved by June,
right,
right? You're starting to kind of build next year's.
yeah, because the agenda planning,
Okay.
the annual agenda itself is a different policy. Developing. Hang on, give me 1 second
Okay,
here.
right, let's go to the-
One too many policies tonight, I think.
right?
Yeah,
Keep
so,
forgetting.
so the first one is just, laying out the things we need to have in it, and I believe we've touched all of those somewhere in the agenda. Time for education, we've gone through that. For that whole first section, I believe we've touched. I don't think there's a timing component on that one.
There isn't in the policy statement.
No. No, that's
So-
why I'm wondering why the conclusion.
And when I think about what you actually do is, I think in June, we look at the annual agenda for next year and we kind of agree that you and I are gonna look at it over the summer and kind of turn it over for the next year, because there's a lot of things in there that we do every year that are kind of
Stays the
compliance
same.
stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's some things that are delegated to me, like focus on learning topics. And then at the retreat, you talk about board education development priorities and things, and some of that information then gets folded in, and then it really comes back to you for approval of a final document is like September. So I don't know if you want to modify those dates in the interpretation or not, but that's how it has played out the last couple of years.
Right.
I'm thinking there's no component of timing in here anyway.
No, I don't think we
So
need to have
I
that
don't need to have
interpretation.
that piece, and I think the conclusion is we're in compliance
Yeah.
to what we need. So I think the conclusion on that one is just we report compliance.
But do we need to change the interpretation?
Uh,
Because there's no sense in leaving the timing in there if it doesn't tend to match the precedent we've set with
Right.
how we're doing business.
Right, the conclusion would not the new conclusion of reporting compliance would not match the interpretation.
Right.
right.
Right, and we're only,
If you were to say something that the annual agenda will be reviewed in June and approved in September,
So let's change that one.
that would put you in compliance, I believe.
Okay. Okay, yeah, because it says the annual agenda will be approved at the board's annual reorganizational meeting rather than
And that's not really what happened.
change
No.
that piece.
We're like midstream by that
Right.
point.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a
We're
good
cruising.
time to, I don't think that's a good time to,
Can reorganize everything.
well, you got potentially up to 2 new members on the board trying to make a decision
Yeah.
about something that you haven't had any impact
Right,
with
but the
yet.
whole idea of a annual agenda is to start it at the beginning of the school year, you know, right after, so
Mhm.
we've had time to review, like at the end of June,
Yeah,
look at where we
and then
got,
approve it
do the
after our
board
retreat.
and then, so that we're kicking,
Okay.
through the school year. Then we come back, reflect again in June,
Okay.
reset priorities, fold things in.
Okay, so we'll change the last sentence in that. What I would suggest then is that we, because we're changing the policy, reword it, have it come back through consent with the changes noted.
You're
and
not
we'll-
changing the policy, you're changing the
The
interpretation.
Interpretation.
Yeah.
In the policy, though, it says the annual agenda will be approved at the board's annual reorganizational meeting,
Oh,
which is
right.
March.
Yep,
So that would have to be,
yep, so that would
I
be a
think
policy change, you're
that
right.
is the piece that I'm thinking that we'd need to change. So let me, I'll adjust that one, but because it's a policy change, I'd rather
Yeah.
not
Yep.
approve it verbally, then change it. So I'll
no, but it
change
can
it,
come
put
in
it,
the consent agenda next.
and we'll put it come through the consent agenda. It's a little different than what we have been doing, but,
Yep.
so let me, if I don't write it down, I'll forget about it.
I got notes and we can polish it up and run it past.
That's why I like this guy. Keeps me honest. Somebody's got to do it. So just a brief, and I know we're getting kind of into our evening here, but that is a little bit of an innocuous change. Does that make sense from a practice standpoint? If we're going to change something in the policy, everybody agrees that at the meeting now that we do that, we'll bring it back through consent with the adjustment?
Yes.
That makes sense I just don't want to make it too easy to make that change. We need everybody to approve the consent agenda. It can be, yes. We just want to make sure that it doesn't become,
Do you wanna make it a motion?
No.
not tonight, we're gonna
We can always pull it out
Word
of
it.
the consent agenda if we need to.
and then if it has an issue, we'll pull it out of consent next time. That'll work.
The policy change will be added to the next consent agenda for approval? Is that what I heard?
Yes, some policy updates based on timing, updates being done based on change of timing. Yeah. And then we'll send it back through consent. Any other changes? All right. And then wanted to bring this one back, I think for two reasons. This is the board members' code of conduct. We've all seen this before. We had a signed copy out in the lobby, had Julian's name on it. Thought it might be a good chance to have Alex sign on basic, and then maybe we can get a picture too before we leave. Then we can post that on our board in the lobby. I think from a code of conduct perspective, one of the things that I think we do real well is if it is not necessarily a unanimous vote, whatever the quorum is, people are following. We go with whatever the majority says, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of issues where we haven't had any issues where we've had verbal outbreaks on points of disagreement from anybody in a minority. So I think, no other problems with that. So any comments there? Thought we'd get this reinforced and re-signed and reposted and get it. Thought it'd be a good time to bring it back. So we got a copy that we can sign here. Really no action to take here, just that everybody has seen it one more time.
Well, heck yeah. It's a nice pen.
All right.
Would you like to use my pen as well?
Thank you.
Yours is worse than mine.
And then down to the recent activities by board members will focus on communications plan and then the book discussion. I think we'll move to the book discussion. So this is a copy for everybody here.
That's
of
the communication stuff from the retreat. Yeah.
So this is, and Matt, I think you had your picnic. This is the material that the Image folks had gone through when we had done it. So just that's a copy for you. Thank you. Ink didn't stay up with me.
I just recycled some of this.
All right. So I think we've had in here an item on the agenda, recent community activities by board members, period. Which was interesting, but we talked about the things that we went to, but not whether we actually got actively involved as a board member with a little more visibility. So I think that's part of what led us then into the deepening community discussion. And then based on the Image information, how do you take that forward? So, do you mind if I turn it over for some guidance here on the?
Yeah.
On the
So, just as a little bit of background, Paul Bourne, Canadian guy, has started to do a lot of work in Vermont through Collective Impact, and was supported by United Way to come. Has done a number of conferences and is working, continues to work with a lot of nonprofit groups, and I think his work is excellent. He's had incredible results in growing economy and reducing poverty in Canada, particularly in the southwest of Canada. So I've been passing this. I gave the book to the board. I've been passing it out to some of the PTO leadership to some of other of our community partners and getting people to read it, because for me it really struck home in that we often sit down and try to do the really complex work of solving social complicated social problems, and we're sitting in rooms with people that we don't know at all, and we forget to take the time to get to know each other and become connected before we actually dive into the work. And that is really at the heart of Paul Bourne's premise, and he kind of gives a roadmap of how to do that. So I developed a couple of questions. Of course, this is a discussion, not the end-all, be-all, so please take it wherever it goes. But I just started with that first one and tried to give some page numbers for the first couple so that you can reference, in terms of, Bourne talks about the challenge of finding the time and energy to be a good neighbor. How do you find this time and energy, and what are the challenges to finding the time and energy to be a good neighbor? Because I think this is one of the most challenging things for all of us in today's world, and there's a lot of reasons that it's challenging. So I'd open it up for the discussion with that first question.
One thing that strikes me as my life has shifted in the last couple of years is my neighborhood is a pretty tight little street, and what I've noticed is now that I'm a single woman homeowner, my need to have help has actually deepened relationships. And so there's this interesting, I feel like, sharp edge between needing neighbors and having the space and time to give also. And there's this vulnerability of asking for help, which has really opened up relationships a bit. And I found that an interesting place to be, to really reach in. And he spoke a lot about that in terms of like deepening community so that we can rely on each other when times are tough, but also celebrate it when you have something positive also to share. So I'm finding that an interesting space right now in terms of being a good neighbor, both giving and receiving. And that's an interest, because sometimes we always think about being good neighbors as we're just giving, but also people love to participate. And so it is a fascinating dynamic.
Yeah.
Like you came and helped me take me to the dump. Which is awesome. And don't you worry, I'll be calling you again.
Still haven't trimmed the bushes. But I won't tell anybody. I live in an interesting neighborhood that's kind of forced Jill and I to take some time to try, and it's not, I don't even know that it's as much being a good neighbor as being a known neighbor. The other side of the street from us abuts the St. Mike's property, and they bought all the houses on that side of the street, and the people they put in there are not students, they're adjunct professors, they're staff somehow, but they're in and out every couple of years. So what we've tried to do over the years is in say August or September, maybe even into October, is have a party at the house, so just a big pot of chili or something, and send a little flyer and say, come and meet your neighbors. Because as soon as you get into November and December and every winter comes and the doors close, you're done. The only time you see them are in and out. And it's made a difference in just being able to say hi to somebody that you know and open up that conversation point. So
Well, and that's a perfect example of what he talks about a lot when he began to talk about at the end of these 30 pages, but talks about a lot later, is having fun together and just sharing time. And oftentimes he talks about his Mennonite background later, and it's over food. Which is a perfect getting people together, and that's how you get to know each other.
But you got to force yourself to get out, get the flyers, get the word out.
Somebody's got to be the organizer.
You got to get it started.
Yeah.
So
That speaks to, we created this called Circle Sisters last year based on the election of Trump and the fear around not knowing, especially with our friends who practice Islam, making sure that women to women we were knowing each other. So we started out doing these potlucks together once a month. And it was because we had, one person was a great organizer. It would have not happened without the one person who had the time to email everybody and go, here's where it's happening, here's what's going on. And that just kind of kept the group together. There's a lot of different roles in that, yeah.
And that's the hard part, is finding someone that can fit in the role. Like, I'll be honest with you, like, emailing is so hard for me because, you know, you think of all the other things, but when I'm in the moment, it's easier to be the connector to help. I think something that you said about asking for help is helping our neighbors to show that we're not perfect human beings, because I think what happens is that, you know, with deeper communities, it's always about perceptions, you know, that everybody is perfect and that I'm not. And it's easier, for me, it's easier to do in a student group. And I realized this as I was out there doing the walk. I really just walked. Like, I didn't know how to inject myself without, because I'm still feeling like an outsider. Yeah, I'm still learning a lot. You know, I was at the soccer game on Saturday and trying to figure out, okay, so what do I do and how do I inject myself into, you know, because, and I'll be honest, there's some baggage with me coming from State College and the whole Sandusky element that, like, I'm going, like, are they seeing me as the creepy old man around? Like, you know, how do I do it? You know, how do they know that I'm a school board member or it's not just a line?
That's,
you know,
it's always a hard. It's an interesting topic to bring up when you're in that situation, that, you know, you're on a school board, and what does that really mean to somebody? What would it mean? You know.
Well, if you just say that exactly, you'll
I
find
know.
out.
Yeah,
no,
right.
and that's part of my growth, right?
Yeah.
Like, and why I decided to do this is because, and I'll be honest, that's my growing period here. I'm trying to just get out
I
there.
didn't notice he was there until the end
Yeah.
because I was too busy with the dog. I brought the puppy.
You're not alone in that quest to figure out how you,
Get a dog.
even after years. So.
And the perception thing did play a lot because I never so when I first moved in to my, like, building, I was trying to say hi to everybody and they weren't as happy when I said hi. And then there was this big assumption that, you know, they asked where I worked, and they all assumed that I was a doctor at the medical school. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to do some education here. On perceptions and stereotypes of things. So.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think research backs this up, and my experience is the best way to break down those stereotypes is to gather and to get to know.
Right.
You know, I mean, a lot of what he talks about, like in the 3 types of community, fear-based community. We fear what we don't know and understand and don't feel connected to.
I've helped people paint their houses. Like, I have a single mom, so I went over and helped her paint her children's room and her, which is very fun. But I'm an outdoor person, so I talk to everybody that will listen. So I work with kids. So.
Well, and like you said, I mean, walking your dog, right? I mean,
We walk the dogs. I have, like, there was one woman walking by, and we had a pumpkin plant grow in the front of our house this year, which was awesome. Got 3 pumpkins off of it. But one of the women, one of the new Americans, she's been around, she's been up to the school too. I don't know her name though, and she doesn't speak English very well, but basically she picked the ends of my plant because I guess they can cook them. And then I told her I had a garden, and I brought her back to my garden and let her pick what she wanted out of that. So I use that as a tool also. Gardening. I bring people food, like, stuff out of it if they want it. You always have a surplus. But that's about my extent of community involvement.
I feel like one of the biggest challenges that I have is just trying to manage my energy, because a lot of this, I think, building community takes place outside of personal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't always have the energy, nor do I tend to be more of an introverted person, and so when I have my own time where I'm choosing what I want to do, I want to be, like, with my family or my closest friends, and I'm not always interested in, like, kind of broadening that community. So it's something like bringing awareness to myself about how do I do that.
So,
and
because
step
Brian
out of
works
that a
nights
little bit.
and weekends, that makes it way easier for me
Yeah.
because I'm the same way, and I need to mow the lawn more than I need to go talk to people. But yeah, if you have different schedules, it's always a good time to push yourself. Except you're always probably at the meetings, not.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's kind of like we build ourselves into these fast-paced lives, right? And technology plays a part in that. Profession plays a part, and then you just start kind of looking around, at least I do sometimes, and you're like, I don't know where I can find the time to do some of these things that I want to do, even if I wanted to do them. Or time and energy. What about number 2? Is community a regular part? What are some of the things that do you have like rituals or regular things that you do that you think kind of deepen or build community?
The biggest one for me is, and I don't do it much in the summertime, but in the wintertime during snowfalls, it's taking the shovel around the neighborhood. It's
You should
just
come on down to mine.
But when everybody's out and you just spend, that extra 20 minutes helping them at the end, or, it's just makes for that time that you can help and you can get to know somebody even a little bit. But I'm with the show. It's not something I'm going to go out and plan. I'm out already, so
Right.
it's just a matter of just broadening it rather than making a conscious decision to go and do something in an evening. So.
Destiny, do you or your family do anything that you feel like, brings a strong sense of community for you?
Well, just kind of going back to like the first question with neighborhoods, I guess it does relate to communities. Like my grandparents aren't around here, and the neighborhood I live in has a lot of like elderly people, like elders, so they don't have their grandchildren around here. So what we usually do is like have potlucks together, with cultural foods, and the people who live at the end of the street, the ones you never see, at that potluck you usually get to meet with them, have a little chat with them, and they're little ones, the little ones are playing together, so then the parents get to talk. It's not really big, but like community-wise, the gardening too, like as you said. I don't know what it is about food. I guess it's just always food and gardening that get people together. I guess it's food, yeah.
Is that a big group? I mean, is it like just one section of the street?
We live on a hill, so it's like the people who are on the hill.
Oh, okay.
We have like the potluck, but at the end of the hill, they all come together. Like, why not come in?
Is it North Street?
I'm on LeClaire, La Fountain.
Oh, okay.
So
Oh, yeah, that
yeah.
is a street hill.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. I feel like, again, like noticing a major shift in my schedule change of going from single mom to 2 parents, like it does shift your time. And I think like chores and recognizing, it also made me connect deeper with people whose lives are changing when they move to this community. And what a massive shift that is, to get in touch with our own massive shifts, to recognize how that is a temporary, there's a time frame for that kind of struggle, getting your feet back on the ground, of like how do you use your time, what you have to let go of to shift, what now you have to add to get in things. It definitely made me feel more connected to what it must be like, anytime someone moves in or moves out of communities, that is moves out of different places certainly, but also just restructuring family systems, which happens more in our culture now than ever before. That's something to be aware of, in terms of time, because it has changed my relationship with even my neighbors, or my capacity, to be aware of.
I was really struck by number 3, that in making it a priority to enhance individual rights and opportunities, have we made it easier for people to ignore community responsibilities?
Absolutely.
How so?
I think, well, I live on a street that's unlike most, so I think, I don't know. We aren't, so, like, if you see somebody's on the street and doing something inappropriate, you will turn a blind eye. Like, you just do, you just make, you make it so that your community is safe and that you keep track of everything, but you also don't take responsibility of making sure everything is okay. So I believe that I do a lot of helping people find their opportunities for things they need and directing them in places that they should go. But that's just because of my job and because that's, you know, the way I focus if I need to. But I also know that a lot of things are ignored as communities.
Turn the blind eye.
Absolutely,
It's easier.
absolutely. In fact, and you don't want to call. Like I have had to report certain things, and like you look and you're like, do I really want to do this? Do I want to be that neighbor that's doing something? But then I also look at, well, I'm outside. This is happening, and I have 12 kids in the front of my house right now. So, yeah, it's pretty safe to say that what's happening is unsafe. So, and base my decision on that. But then at night when I'm alone, you know, do I? Nope. I wouldn't. You know what I'm saying? So there's a difference, and we don't hold the neighbors responsible or community responsible. That's where my neck of the woods, though. Yours could be different. Matt had a fire near his house not too long ago.
It was not set by me.
Did you go and help them? Were you one of the ones that went out?
Was not like I did not go out. No, I didn't. I kind of learned about it after the fact. So, yeah.
Sadly, it was like the fire alarms is how I'm meeting my community, because our fire alarms have been going off in our building at like 5 in the morning, and you go out there and you meet community, and on that. But think about the question. I think there are two elements of it. One is I think we've lost how to do community with the with the new technologies that allow us to be more isolated. And then I think there's also an element of with some of us with wealth and money, we think if we just write a check, someone else would do it, and we don't understand, and sometimes and society does not reward these things either. We don't always recognize the people that spend that hour or 2 hours with the community. We recognize, how our building's named. Right. Someone who writes a check. It isn't the person that was there on a consistent basis. Except I did notice that the hot dog lady was honored on Church Street, right? That's kind of element of trying to build that community in that sense, to say that there's more than just money to help a society. And it's just kind of recognizing. It's kind of like, and when I was dead serious about when I said that, the Hearts program is trying to recognize those good, strong behaviors so that we start appreciating the deeper community, and isn't just, hey, I write a check, let someone else do it.
You just made me realize, like, I think as a community overall for Winooski, it's a really good community. Like, when you go out on a bottle drive for these kids, like, most people are very supportive of stuff like that. So I think in that respect, our community is awesome and very, very involved with that.
It's super fun when students come around and ask, like actually allow you this opportunity to get involved. I think that's super exciting. Yeah.
Alex, you made an interesting comment about technology, and I wonder how much transplanted community is out there, because I can be on this in my living room in the chair and feel like I'm a part of a broader community, but it's only a one-way, interaction, rather than actually being out and talking to people. It's a very different form of feeling community, I guess, if you can call it that. But
it is a community in a way, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's a real tension in society right now, I think, and it's challenging to tease out, because, you know, rates of teen suicide are going up, and they're attributing that to isolation and, you know, anxiety and depression, you know, a lot related to technology and not relating human to human in person. You know, the mental health rates, issues are going up, and technology plays, I think, a huge role in that. But it's become, you know, it's a necessary way of being a part of the world, and we're still trying to figure that out.
But some of the technology is not necessarily the technology and its fault. It's our behavior with the technology, right?
Our
Meaning,
interaction with it.
so like Facebook, right? If we looked at Facebook statuses, no one really says, I'm having a beep day.
Mm-hmm.
They always posing all these positive thoughts that we almost think that everybody is a positive human being.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
No.
We don't necessarily always share the struggles that we had to reach those points. And I think that's some of the issues with technology. Technology is actually kind of cool in the way that I can see my mom connecting with her sisters in Taiwan to share the issues that they have that make the world a lot smaller. But they're still communicating in a two-way fashion, as opposed to we posting you know, like yesterday I think I just posted because I was at a bookstore and I go, woo woo, I got a signed copy of John Green's latest book. Because John Green, I don't know, not that I read any of his stuff, but I was like, wow, John Green, but like it just sounds like I'm having a great time in life because, you know, I found a John Green, but you know, they're not knowing sometimes you know, I don't share the struggles of like, you know, yeah, everybody in my condo complex thinks I'm a medical doctor. I think, and it actually took me a while to figure out that one because I was like, why is it everybody think I'm a medical doctor? And then I was, oh wait, I'm Asian. They're just, I forget that stereotype. You know? That's what it is. You know, but I'm not necessarily sharing.
See, I went off Facebook for that reason, opposite of that reason. It's negativity.
Oh.
So it's how everyone, you know, it's every person's thing. And you just don't want to hear all the bad things in the world. So.
Yeah. So I think to wrap for this evening, I think we'll continue to interject a few pieces of this, and I think all at an aim at how do we get, as a board, more comfortable getting out into the community and sensing, you know, how that happens and how that works.
Well, I think that last question hits on it. You know, what can we do to deepen community, and that is, you know, trying to get out to have these community conversations and really connect.
Which we have to talk about. We'll put into the November. How do we had talked about having parents in to have another forum, right?
Yeah.
Of some sort. So I think in November what we can do is we'll have a discussion about what does that entail. I've already gotten a couple of people because of the newsletter piece that I had put out, a couple of people that said that
Unless
they
you
want to
need
be
it.
to join us. So we've got at least a couple of folks. But what do we want to get out of it? Is what we've got to discuss. Where do we want to be when we get done, so that we can have a fruitful discussion, have the right people in the room when we have it. But the ones that we've had in the past with the colleges, with the work environments, local and global engagement, I thought those were just very much worth the time that we spent having those discussions. So with having it with parents would be.
I think we should develop some guiding discussion questions if we do stuff like that in our homes and whatnot.
Yeah,
That would be helpful.
That'll be the step
for me
after
to-
we invite folks in here
Right,
to
to
get
find
that
out.
together. How do we propagate that then out, and how quickly can we start getting it going? That may be our interaction with the community, is each of us taking a leadership role in guiding that discussion in house. Take some of us out of our comfort zone, but get us into the community and where we really need to be. So
Thank you for this. We should do another
we'll
chapter.
do
We will continue.
another little piece. Good. Anything else to close out the evening? Anything we missed? Carry forward, new budget, new agenda items? Any other agenda items? All right, very good. I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Didn't think so. All right. Great.
No executive?
Thanks. No executive tonight.
Right?
Don't have anything,
That is huge.
It's a
don't have
Facebook
anything
status.
kicking.
Woo, non-executive session.
Yes.